Okay, well, this is our first video in class called Business Organizations. My name's Rob Dawalt. I'm going to be your instructor. I'm going to put I've got a private email here so that you can access me. My other details are in the syllabus. I hope that you give that a good solid look. We're going to just kind of give you a bit of an introduction today to the concepts in the textbook on business organizations. There's three basic types of business organizations, and that's what we want to start with. Sole proprietorships, and just leave it like that. Partnerships, and corporations. So, generally speaking, most types of businesses fit under one of these three categories. Sole proprietorship, generally speaking, as a single owner, kind of like a small hardware store, something like that. Partnerships, though, it might be that two guys come together, want to form a clothing store or something like that, and there's a lot of hours in a week, so one guy can't run it himself, so they have to bring on more partners in order to make it all work. A lot of these convenience stores that you see now, you'll see whole families working in these convenience stores. They're working 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. That's a lot of hours for one person, so they divide it up that way. Corporations, on the other hand, are formal types of business organizations. In the early days of the United States, a corporation was formed because you had to go to the state legislature and get a charter for a corporation. And now what they did in terms of later years, because of the complexity of society, they changed that to the Secretary of State. So basically, every state has a Secretary of State or someone like that. Some of them call them a clerk or something like that. And so basically they just record your different basic structural elements of the corporation, like the bylaws and that type thing. So there's what we call articles of incorporation. There's a number of different parts to it. So this is one of the big changes from the 18th, 19th century over into the 20th century. Now in partnerships, it used to be that a lot of partnerships were formed on a handshake. That is still possible. People do that. But it's not advisable. You need some kind of records. The problem that you get into with a lot of these things, you have debt in terms of with banks and places like that. You have taxation issues with the state and the federal government in terms of the IRS. And so they want to know more about who the partners are, and that needs to be formalized into a basic form of ownership between the partners. So the old handshake way of doing business has kind of gone by the wayside, not so much because of the trust between the parties, but more so because of issues with the other outside people that are affected by the partners. Liability issues if there is an accident, like I said earlier, the government and also banks and people like that. So there's more and more a requirement that things be formalized with some kind of written agreement. And one of the basic rules is that corporations must have articles of incorporation and bylaws and minutes of meetings and things. So everything has to be in writing. It's optional in partnerships, but strongly recommended. And you don't need any kind of written documents and so forth in sole proprietorship because there's only one owner. So that's the kind of things that we're going to work on when you start looking at your book. and when we start working through the discussions. We want you to, talk about this. What are some of the advantages and disadvantages? One of the things that we get into is there are different aspects of this. Partnerships can have what they call limited partnerships. So let's just talk a little bit about that. So the different kinds of partnerships called limited liability partnership, okay? What that is they're saying is that they're all kind of generally the same, but they are not liable for things that are done by the other partners in the corporation. There are also, and that'd be like an LLP, but in contrast, there's what they call, there's an LLC, which can be a limited liability corporation. There are also professional corporations, and this can also be confused sometimes with limited liability partnerships. Another important thing on the corporations, there's the S Corp, which is really, it's a tax kind of a situation where it looks like a corporation, barks like a corporation, but it's has a lot of tenets of partnership. So in a way, it's kind of a hybrid between a corporation, but it has certain advantages from partnerships in terms of taxation. So it can be a little bit of both, an S corporation. Now there are also what we call limited corporations, and these are like family-owned businesses. That's we've got to be careful when we say limited partnership, limited corporation. That doesn't mean that they are a limited liability. So limited means like owned by one family, basically the limited liability means that the owners of the corporation are not going to be liable for the acts of the corporation. So there's a big difference there. So read this pretty carefully. One thing too to keep in mind, just basic general principles. Sole proprietorship is owned by one person. A general partnership is owned by two or more people. Limited partnership, there's a state statute, and there are actually what's called general partners and limited partners, and some of the limited partners are actually only involved in financial aspects. They loan the business money and they get some ownership, they share in the profits, but they don't make any of the decisions and they're not liable for anything. So those are things to consider when making these. Professional corporations can be a corporation that practices law, medicine, accounting, engineering. Limited or small corporation can be called also a closed corporation. Shareholders are usually part of the same family or a small group. So basically you've got to kind of look at what seems to work the best for you. A lot of people start out as a sole proprietorship, and then they may bring on more partners when they see that the business has grown, for example, and then become a partnership. Then they might say, well, there's a lot of complexity here, we've got potential, but we need to raise more capital. So then they might decide to move from a partnership to a corporation where they can have shareholders that really have no role in the management of the company on a day-to-day basis, but share in the profits at the end. Important to keep in mind these different things. Here's a thing too you'll see in your PowerPoints. Companies indexed by numbers. There are 11.6% of corporations have 856,000 employees or more. There are 2% that have 154,000. There are 0.2% that have 12,000. There are 0.1% that have 7,000 employees, and there are 6,359 corporations or companies or partnerships or sole proprietorships in the United States that have under 20 employees. That's 86% of all business in the United States has under 20 employees. So that's really the little engine that can in our economy. So much of the work on a day-to-day basis gets done by very small organizations. So very interesting comparison. The two that really are of value is the very large corporation is over 856,000 employees. Like for example, Walmart has over 1 million employees. And then the other one that's in contrast is the companies with under 20 employees, which has 6,359,000 people that work for small business under 20 employees. So 86% of all businesses are what we call small businesses. So I think it's very interesting. Well, the last thing I want to talk about in this video is agency, and basically agency is someone that works for another business. An insurance agent, for example, they are authorized to sell insurance for an insurance company. The principal is the business or the person for whom the agent works. And so the agent has to have a certain level of authority. And then we have what we call apparent authority. Then there's also implied authority. So what they're saying is, if an agent comes to you and say, yeah, well, I've got authority to enter into that contract, or I've got authority to act for this other person, I've got their power of attorney. Any of these agents like this, that is what we call the apparent authority, where they claim that they have that authority. And also in the normal course of business, if certain agents do certain things, like insurance agents, then you expect that they're going to have certain apparent authority. So agency, principal, I gotta see how to spell that. Yeah, PAL, principal. And basically we're talking about authority, and what we mean by that is what are the levels of authority? Just what authority does that agent have? Now, generally speaking, where you can get into litigation is when you get where someone exceeds authority, okay? And that is the problem. And so when you see a lot of litigation, it's where someone exceeds their authority. Let me give you a really harsh example of an agent that exceeded their authority. This guy got out of prison and had a degree in heating, ventilation, and air conditioning. So he went to work for one of these large heating and cooling companies. You see him on television all the time. And he was tasked to go to this lady's house and fix her furnace. So he goes to this lady's house to fix the furnace. Well, she's a very attractive lady, but she's home alone. Well, the guy gets in there, rapes her, steals a bunch of stuff from her, and takes off. So basically what happens is the woman, her husband, everybody there actually sues the corporation, like Bryant or whatever. These big corporations don't assume that it's Bryant, but just one of these big heating and air conditioning companies, and they sue because this guy exceeded his authority, obviously, to rape the person and steal from them. Well, what ended up happening is they said no, that under master-servant theory, or what we call Respondeat Superior, the principal was still liable for the acts of the agent because of the principle of Respondeat Superior. In other words, the company knew this guy had a prior record, yet they gave him a job. He goes out and commits another crime while he's working for them. And so basically they put the wheels in motion for that guy to rape that woman. Now, it's a tough situation because I am one of the biggest proponents in these kind of cases of, giving people a second chance. So it's, this kind of case really makes it tough for felons to come back out into the workforce and get a decent job. So this is where the rub is, that a lot of these companies and corporations now are not eager to take on people with a bad record, because they have to have customer contact, and in those kind of cases they could be liable for their misconduct. So that's a very important consideration when we get into this discussion about agency. Well, hey, I hope that you've enjoyed this little brief lecture. This is the way these are going to be done. I'm just going to pop in and try to give you a slight overview, or maybe even focus in, drill down a little deeper on one topic if I feel like we're not getting the message on some of this. So expect to see more of these in my discussion board posts throughout the semester. Thanks for watching.